policy submission in regarding climate change and water. And what we are going to go into now is to get a deeper understanding of the role of the traditional leaders and how they see the discussion that is on the table. Our traditional leaders are our moral compass, if you like. They give us our identity, but they also call to attention things that are of interest for our well-being. So I would like to add my voice to what has already been said regarding the critical role that traditional leaders play and how this is critical in ensuring sustainable environmental protection, and how this voice needs to be strong in the environmental protection dialogue we are engaged in. At this point, I would like to call upon a representative from WWF. The country director, Ms. Nashala Nkombo, was come, but she will be represented by the manager, government relations and partnerships, Mrs. Isabel Mlea. Madam Mlea, please.
Am I moderating this?
Yes, my guess is I should give you this as well.
Mr. Stillon. What is it? Time for the call. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Your Royal Highnesses. Welcome to the panel discussion that will be looking at the role of traditional leaders in environmental protection. I am your moderator for this specific session. My name is Isabel Mukelebai. I work with the Worldwide Fund for Nature. I think the first question to the panel is perhaps to establish what the role of traditional leaders is in environmental and natural resource protection in the country. As we discuss that particular question, perhaps it would be important for you to share your perspectives on whether this role is clearly understood by relevant stakeholders around you. So maybe we could open up the discussion with that particular question. What is your role as custodians of natural resources in terms of ensuring that these resources are protected? And do you think that your role is clearly understood by key stakeholders around you that you should be working with? Yes, please do go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, our role as traditional leaders in regard to environmental protection, number one, we have to guide these environmental resources jealously by maybe forming community-based teams or groups. By doing so, I think we we will be able to head somewhere. But at the same time, as much as we can form those community-based teams, like our chiefs, the way they've earlier alluded to, we could go by that. It's more or less like you have teeth, but you can't bite. In short, what I'm trying to say, again, it goes back again to resource. As chiefdoms, you know, we don't have any resource. I'm trying to mean about the money which will be able to help us to drive this. And at the same time, again, as much as we can implement by putting bylaws and all that stuff, still it goes to the same. In short, what I'm trying to say, if the government will be able to help the traditional leaders by at least creating or to create, I'm trying to drive at where we come up with a deliberate policy, okay? By passing some of these things through our members of parliament, where it becomes a law, it can really help us. Like, I'm trying to follow what other chiefs alluded at first, but otherwise at the moment, it's a question of creating, you know, community-based teams in order to protect this environment. Thank you.
Please go ahead. Chief Ishima, please go ahead.
Chief Mukelebai, good afternoon. Traditional leaders, I think, superintend over the majority of land in Zambia. And they are the ones who allocate land for various activities like agriculture, mining, all sorts of things. And it is therefore our responsibility as traditional leaders to ensure that the environment is not abused by those who use this land or the environment in general. We are also responsible for making sure that our people, our community are sensitized. They must know the dangers posed by endangering the environment. We are also responsible for making sure that we coordinate activities with government, NGOs, individuals, even churches and others. It's important that we do that. And we must also lead by example. Challenges are there, of course. Do we coordinate properly with government? Sometimes you'll find that we are normally involved in the firefighting area where things now are seen to have gone wrong. That's when now possibly chiefs are called upon to say, help us do this. I think we must be involved in these things from the way they go. When they are planning, we must be in the minds of those who are planning, whether you are NGOs also, so that we are on the same page at every stage. I will have to say that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that submission. Chief Ishima, you can go ahead.
Thank you very much. In discussing this topic, I would love to tackle it from the historical and traditional aspect. Prior to the advent of Islam, Christianity, and the coming of the European, how did we live? As Africans, we believed in the Tiara, which is African traditional religion. We lived together in harmony with nature and mankind and God in between. But when the white man came, brought in religion and Islam, greed came in, selfishness came in, and then destruction of the environment and the natural resources started. We are all aware of the scramble for Africa. All this was the European coming for our natural resources. So what are the roles of the traditional leaders? I feel the first role as traditional leaders is that we are the custodian of this environment and also the protection of it. In the old days, how did society protect the land? For example, where I come from, there was a story of a human beast called Chishimukulu. So the Chishimukulu was an imaginary beast which was said to be in the forest, for example. And if you go there, it moves with a boiling pot. So that prevented the people to go in the forest or to distract, and that preserved our natural resources. It is also the responsibility of the traditional leaders to govern the management of the environment and the natural resources such as the land, forests, water, the fish, the plains, the minerals, the birds, and the vegetation. Traditional leaders have also the responsibility to enforce traditional rules on the utilization of the environment and the natural resources. Furthermore, it is the role of the traditional leaders to regulate the access to the environment and also the natural resources using traditional methods. Furthermore, it is also the duty of the traditional leaders to preserve the environment and the natural resources. For example, from the natural resources, we could get clothes, blankets, like from the bark of a tree. We could get medicine from the herbs. And the environment could even tell some time. And that's how important the environment was for it to be preserved. So the safeguarding and protecting of the environment and the natural resources by giving rules which should be followed by all the villagers. And it is the role of the chief to ensure that that is followed. In the promotion of the sustainable natural resources management systems, traditional leaders are the pillar upon which this noble cause can be achieved. The role of the traditional leaders is also to disseminate the government policies and programs by working together with the district officials, with the provincial officials, even stakeholders. For example, this is one good example where we are networking to have the dissemination of information. We believe that the knowledge that we're going to be baptized here, we're going to take it to our chiefdoms so that our royal establishments are also going to benefit. In the rural areas or in our chiefdoms, we usually hold consultative meetings on the forest issues, on, for example, even the rivers. We have problems like we have already been cited of charcoal burning because of hardships. Our people use, for example, very bad fishing methods of using the nets. So those are some of the consultative meetings which their traditional leaders should hold so that they are able to educate their subjects on the good practices of how to preserve the environment and the natural resources. The chief's role also is to agree on the penalties. For example, His Royal Highness earlier in the day was talking about the issue of what do we do if we find a culprit, for example, on Chakobeni. And maybe if the government is not helping us, the police are not helping us, then the royal establishment should come up with agreed penalties together with the villagers so that those that are found wanting could be punished. Then traditional leaders also have the role to control the livestock and the grazing. For example, in the chiefdoms, we have animals like the cows, the goats, and the pigs who usually stray even in state land and also in schools, like in places like schools, and they disrupt the smooth running of the institution. The role also of the chiefs is to formulate local bylaws which govern the environment and the natural resources. And also it is the role of the traditional leaders to participate in consultation of environmental impact assessment done by the new investors, and also to implement land use plans and to control illegal settlements and adjudicate in land disputes. In addition, the traditional leaders also are there to promote and encourage ecotourism and supervise the operations. And last but not least, also to apprehend and secure law offenders in their chiefdoms. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that was a very, very elaborate explanation on the role of traditional leaders in managing our environment and protecting our natural resources. And I think you raise a lot of fundamental issues there, starting from responsibilities and roles that you play around national planning. Just zeroing in a little bit on that submission, I think the question perhaps would be, given your role in terms of supporting planning and ensuring that when we are designing some of these programs, we are supposed to ensure that there's adequate consultation with the custodians of these natural resources. To what extent have the Royal Highnesses conducted any kind of stocktake of the natural resources under their custody? In short, we are looking at whether or not the traditional rulers have a solid understanding of the natural resource stocks that they have and the importance of these natural resources. So when we look at a particular chiefdom, do you have national data that indicates to you what exactly you have in that particular area, so that then it helps you to govern a little bit better, informed by the data that you have, and also allows you to devise strategies working with other stakeholders to ensure that you are able to protect and promote more sustainable use.
Excuse me, here.
Yes, please.
We thought that this was a well-structured discussion with a question already set and prepared for the role of traditional rulers in the issue at hand. But you are rushing to another question before you have exhausted their roles. Can't we finish the roles first before we come to that other aspect that you are bringing in? because these Royal Highnesses are prepared to give you some more of their roles. Remember, we come from different chiefdoms.
Okay, thank you very much for that submission. However, I did not see an additional hand, hence I move to the next question. Apologies for that. We can proceed.
It's a structured discussion. There is a list that was supposed to be followed. Have you ignored that one, or it was just written for the sake of it?
No, my submission is that the question that I asked at first was about the role. After the submission of Chief Ishima, I did not see a follow-up response to that. Hence, I move to the next question.
Our request is that we exhaust this one before we move to
Sure.
the next one, according to the program.
Sure, that is fine. You can please give your submission on the role of the traditional leaders in addition to what has been said.
We request the Gambera to give you our version of the roles.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to highlight the role of the Baroti Royal Establishment, which is our institution, traditional institution, governing Barotland. We are talking about the role of traditional leaders, and we are looking at their role, the challenges in this role, the opportunities in this role, and what we could do probably to assist, improve a better working system. To understand the role of Baroti Royal Establishment as a traditional leadership in the protection of the environment, I think it is better to appreciate in the first instance the traditional structure that governs the Baroti Royal Establishment. Barotland as a whole is a region, it's a land on its own, which is governed by a traditional system. In laws we call it Mlonga. At the helm, that is at the top of this leadership, we have His Majesty the Litunga, the King of Barotland, who is the overall king, the overall leader of the whole region. And immediately below him, by delegation, he has district senior chiefs. We have a number of them. We have senior chieftainess Mbuyu, who is in charge of issues arising in the districts of Nalolo and Senanga. We have chieftainess Mbonjikana, who is responsible for Kalabo and the Skongo districts. We have Senior Chief Inyambo, who is responsible for Sesheke, Mwandi, and Mulobezi districts. We have Senior Chief Amkena, who looks after the traditional affairs in Kaoma, Nkeyema, and Luamba districts. And we have Senior Chief Ananga, who is in charge of Lukulu and the Mitete districts. And finally, we have Senior Chief Lukama, who looks after Shangombo and the Sioma districts. Then we have the whole country covered by our traditional leadership. And below the district chiefs, or rather, these district chiefs operate through district quotas. These are traditional administrative units. And then below the district units, we have sub-districts. We call them Lilalo. One is Lalo. Each district is subdivided into smaller units called Lilalo. And there is an induna in charge of each of these sub-districts. And each sub-district superintends over a number of villages, upwards of 50 villages in each sub-district, with village headmen heading these villages. You can see that the whole country is ruled in a democratic manner by all these leaders. And they are responsible for the traditional affairs within their area of jurisdiction. In terms of natural resources, each unit, the smallest unit, which is the village, has got its own area which it is looking after, where there are forests, there are rivers, there are lakes, there are lagoons, there are canals. And each village is responsible for the affairs taking place within its area of jurisdiction. So it is easier to manage, and it works very well and efficiently in this way. Now, looking at the role of traditional leaders in this setup of Barotseland, we see that the traditional leadership promulgates rules. That is, it formulates rules that govern the people they look after. Rules that also take care of the environment. And by environment, we are looking at the flora and fauna of the land. We are talking about the land and the water bodies, among other things. And the traditional leaders make laws or rules that specifically take care of these issues. So, in terms of flora, for example, they may carve out some forests as protected forests. Nobody is allowed to go there and cut trees and work within those forests because they are protected. They are protected as natural resources for the land, for use later on, like making canoes and probably fetching poles for building royal houses and things like that. There are certain tree species which are protected. Fruit trees, for example, are not allowed to be cut down, to be hewn down, because they have a special function within the society to provide foodstuffs when it is necessary. They are also protected game species, the eland, for example, the elephant, and many others. Even the reedbuck, the red liche, for example, were also protected. It is the role of the traditional leaders to enforce compliance to the rules that they have made in relation to the protection of natural resources. Traditional rulers in Barotseland also evaluate the state of the environment in order to seek redress where the environment has been destroyed or degraded. They work with the relevant government institutions, government ministries to enhance the protection of certain natural resources in their area of competence. So these are some of the roles of traditional rulers in Barotseland. We have a number of challenges. Challenges come from various supporters. For example, with the onset of the new political dispensation, the current governments that we have, political governments, traditional ways of looking after natural resources have been relegated, and in fact, they've almost been stopped. Traditional leaders don't seem to have any function, any relevance to the protection of their natural resources. And yet, we know that they have the capacity to do so through their traditional structures, traditional administrative structures, which expose them to all parts of the land, which enable them to appreciate at very short notice changes that are taking place within the environment. But because they've been pushed aside, removed from the responsibility of looking after natural resources, then they don't participate very actively because government has taken over. This is a problem, a challenge in itself. Conflict also in the authority regarding the use and also protection of natural resources is another challenge that we see. Land. The acts that have been enacted in the past sometimes conflict with the normal traditional way of taking care of our land systems. So then this conflict in itself creates a bit of unease both to the government and to the traditional leadership, so that the effective way of looking after natural resources diminishes and renders our natural resources vulnerable to misuse by certain unscrupulous workers. Lack of resources to police the enforcement of our rules is also another problem. It is a challenge because then traditional leaders lack the capacity to visit various places to see how people are misusing our natural resources. They don't have vehicles, they don't have other facilities that help in the policing of our landscapes. Limitation of authority. Legislation by government has removed the authority of leadership, of traditional leadership, in looking after natural resources. What am I talking about? I'm saying there are certain pieces of legislation, probably statutory instruments, which forbid traditional leaders from doing certain things regarding natural resources. Right now in Pataland, the issuance of licenses in logging, for example, if one wants to be doing some business in timber work, he would walk, I don't know which office, here in Lusaka, maybe land's office, and obtain a special license without really reference to the traditional leaders who are looking after the particular forest where this person is going to work. You see one morning somebody with a wood miser and starts cutting trees in a land where a traditional leader has jurisdiction. This creates conflict, and it is a challenge in itself. In the case of Pataland, the people who have been given special licenses cut wood, cut trees down, sow them in in timber and stamp them with a hammer written BNG, that is Barot's native government, without really reference to the Barot's native government itself, whose authority stamp they are using to export this timber, and they don't even leave any royalties to the Barot's royal establishment. This in itself is a problem that we think government should revisit and try to redo and help. Economic considerations are another challenge. Today, with the rampant poverty in Barot's land, some people from other regions come with all sorts of nets, with very, very small mesh, sometimes which can scoop out even fingerlings, even the eggs of fish and insects which are thrown out on land to dry and die. They come to the village headmen, sometimes coax them into accepting or allowing them to fish in their lakes, on their river banks, or some water body. This problem cannot be stopped because now some people would argue, if you stop us from fishing and getting money from the fish that we get, what is the alternative livelihood that you give us? And it becomes a political issue. Even now, government fails to enforce, because people rise against the authorities and say they are uncaring and they don't mind whether people suffer or not. I think this issue is also very difficult to manage. That also comes in the way of logging and poaching. All these come because of economic considerations. These considerations are very difficult to stop because there are no alternative arrangements. But we have opportunities to coming with these difficulties. The opportunities are workshops like the one we have today, where we are engaging each other and sharing ideas regarding the protection of our environment. We have also a government that has interest in the environment. It enacts laws or formulates policies that are meant to protect the environment. So this is very important. And I think it is a good opportunity for us to take advantage of the prevailing political situation. The legal arrangements that government has made, for example, they have ZEMA, Zambia Environmental Management Agency, corporate social responsibility. All these are issues that are meant to protect the environment and the people around certain areas where activities are taking place. Traditional administrative structure. Our structure is also an opportunity because it is efficient and it can quickly react to changes in the environment, because the people who would be affected by environmental degradation are around in the area. And the leaders, traditional leaders at the village level are around in that place. So they can quickly report to the higher authorities in the traditional system so that quick remedial action could be taken. So for Barot's land, the traditional leadership is very seriously engaged in the protection of the environment. You will be interested to know that the first national park, for example, Liuwa Plains National Park, is the first national park in Zambia. and one of the first ones in Africa was started by the traditional leadership. Litunga Lewanika started that, and it was working very well until the problems I raised up before came in, and then management fell, and it almost was wiped out until now it has been listed to the African parks who have revived the park. So in our area, traditional leaders are very, very keen in the good state of the environment. And we have come up with areas and ways of protecting our environment. Our traditional system has two departmental indunas. We have indunas who are in charge of canals, indunas who are in charge of fish management, indunas who are in charge of agriculture, in charge of forestry. But because of the conflict between now the central government and the Balozi traditional system, the link is somewhat fluid, but it is there, and it must be revived and strengthened for the benefit of the environment. We are responsible for best practices in environmental protection. The rules that our traditional leaders promulgate are meant for the good of the communities and also for the good of the environment. So I would like to end by encouraging, or rather persuading, central government really to study and work together with the traditional systems in our area, in our region, so that we can effectively protect the environment. We do not have mineral activities yet, so we may not have the experience firsthand on mineral problems that come within the environment. But with regard to fauna and flora and water, yes, that we can talk about, and we have already put up rules with regard to these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that submission from the Ngambela. Is there any other submission? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. I am representing the Royal Establishment of Senior Chief Mwemba in the Southern Province, in particular Sinazongwe District. And I believe that I'm going to add value to the discussion on the role of traditional leaders in environment and natural resources protection. But allow me to make a statement first before I could even make my submission, that I would like to borrow what Reverend Chikwe has said, that I think blessed are those that sit on pins, because they shall surely stand. And I think this topic needs to be addressed with the honesty it deserves, so that young people who are blessed with organizations like this one, you must be aware that the policies that are there now will affect you, will affect your children. By the time we are not there ourselves to even account for them, you will have already the trouble that you can. So every aspect of a policy, I think, must be checked and must be given its rightful attention so that it receives the correct attention. I want also to mention that I want to get back to the introduction that was done this morning, that I feel very sad that most of the people that are affected in the issue of natural resources and protection in the biggest sense, which are the miners. If I heard correctly from the introduction, there were very few of them that introduced their presence in here. I'm coming from a place where we have two major mines, and I think Mamba Collieries is not here, in Kandabwe is not here, and that is very sad, and I wish this august house to hear that. I want to say that you only protect something that you feel is yours. In the beginning this morning, when some speeches were being made, I loved what Reverend Chukwaya will continue referring to him, as he said that when God created man, he put him in a particular place with a mind that that man shall be a beneficiary of those resources where he was put, and tend them and take care of them. And God did not put a third person there. They were the two of them given that land to take care and to be their property, and also benefit from that property. And that was God's plan. And therefore the only third party that came in is the devil in the name of a snake. And I think that if it was in these modern times when we have learned how to eat snakes, maybe the devil would have been eaten by Adam and Eve and the problems would not have been there. I don't want you to misquote me by saying that investors are snakes in the land, but I just want to say that it is important, like the Induna has mentioned in the first place, that there is need for harmonization. Without harmonization, even this question you are posing to traditional leaders on how to protect resources, how to protect environment, we'll just be sitting here and discussing, and next year we shall come and sit here and discuss. I also want to go back to what Royal Highness Chief Chona said. Young people, be encouraged that when you're organizing meetings which will bring up resolutions to very painful issues like this one, which is under discussion now, those people who were at high table, those stakeholders, the government people, were supposed to be held, and I encourage you that next time you must put your foot down, that they should be here and listen to these submissions, because they are for your own good and for your own future. Some of us are already 65, we have only five more years to the standards of God to have gone. The biggest problem that we have as for now is that of conflict of interest. Even when you want the chiefs to protect the environment, to protect the natural resources, these same natural resources have instead become a source of segregation, hate, and fighting among the Zambian people almost everywhere in the country. Why? Because the powers of protection for the resources, the powers of protection of the environment, which was in the hands of traditional leaders, is no longer there, like the Induna is saying. And you young people who are organizing these meetings must hear this. And the best way to help and the first resolution, I think, would have been that we need to look at the harmonization of the activities, how they are coming in these chiefdoms. I'll give you an example. When we people who are affected by mines, I don't know how you want us to talk about how we protect the natural resources, how we protect the environment, when actually what happens is, like the Induna has explained, an investor will come, he will walk over to any government ministry there, get all what he wants to do, because they say that you have only land surface rights, and what is underground where you are sitting is not yours. And then to ask me to say, how are you going to protect the thing you are telling me is not mine? becomes very difficult. And so the first thing to harmonize in this symposium is to make sure that we come up with policies that are going to take back the protection of the environment and natural resources back to the owners, who are the chiefs and the traditional rulers. Without that, next year, come the other year, we shall sit here again to talk about resolutions of how to protect land and to protect the environment. So to this August House, I want to say that whatever the natural resources are in a particular land in Zambia or wherever, it is the inheritance of the local people. And the local people, under the headmen and their chiefs, are supposed to protect it. But the conflict of interest that has hit our country in terms of the control and the levels of administration are very, very threatening. And if we cannot bring this to check, then I should say that we are sitting here to entertain ourselves. I rest my case.
Sorry, before I take the next submission, just to say I have been guided that we do have government representatives here. I'm informed that the district commissioner will represent the government throughout this meeting. And just in case Your Royal Highnesses, you wish to pose a direct question to the representative, this is just for your noting that there is somebody who is representing the government that is able to take some of your questions. But I think your submission really and emphasis on the need for the panel that was here this morning to have been present when these deliberations are happening is very, very relevant, and it should be taken seriously. Thank you very much. Please do proceed.
Thank you very much. Very briefly. I don't want to say what has been said already. No. I just want to bring to your attention to say there is a problem. There is a problem. Generally, all chiefs in the country are supposed to work with the government of the day in terms of policy. That's how it's supposed to be. On understanding that the government understand the challenges from the chiefs. I'll tell you why. I had said already in the morning that the chiefs have no power. They are only given authority but no power. The chiefs are not respected at all. For your information, we are not respected. It is because, look, chiefs are running a mini government in their chiefdom. We are running mini governments because in every chiefdom there is every line ministry. So the chief should have a say on certain things. If the chief says no, it is no by law. But there it is, a chief can be challenged in the court of law by a subject. The government is quiet. Where is our protection? So there's a big challenge. Although we are quiet, but we are being challenged by our own subject, and the government is quiet. So the government will stand every day on the platform and say, chiefs must work with the government of the day. Yes, but with the understanding that the chiefs must be understood also. We have a problem. Challenges are there. You've heard from the previous speakers what challenges we have. We have so many challenges. We are just quiet because we are meant to be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.
I remember I just stopped on the row of chiefs, but I've seen others now addressing the whole question that you have lined up. I would want to add up We have a lot of challenges, and most of the challenges have been hate. But meanwhile now, major challenges that we have are that we are seeing our rivers, our streams bared of trees. We'll continue talking like this, but meanwhile, we are seeing soil being eroded through improper farming methods. We are seeing trees wantonly cut for charcoal use. These are major challenges that we need to look at. We are seeing charcoal production because urban areas now possibly do not have sufficient electricity for the cookers to be used. Instead, it's charcoal. Those are challenges that we have. Lack of electricity in some of these places is adding pressure on the cutting of trees. We have seen food production being reduced because the rains are not coming the way they used to be. There is climate change, big challenge. We also see, because of lack of food, this hunger, an offshoot of what we're talking about here. And generally, we're seeing poverty increasing. So these are the challenges that we must concentrate on solving. The other challenges, of course, of management, this one will continue being there. But we must prevent the environment from being destroyed as we fight on other issues. Now, despite all these, we must get comfort from certain measures that are being done. Let's look at government. I know other speakers have talked about policies, government policies that seem to be addressing some of these things through various, Dr. Zema there. You're talking of land policy that is being addressed. I think those are challenges that, those issues we must discuss. How does the land policy address our need to protect the environment? Very important indeed. But government is putting up measures to that effect. We, in the Eastern Province, we're taking advantage of the ZFU program, where they are encouraging people to grow up trees and maybe add the value to the food that the maize and everything, value addition. We are also working, for example, in the Eastern Province with what we call Pataland Alliance. These people are with us first to look at the inequality in how we develop. Women are subjected to violence. So we must make sure that this violence stops. The youth, children must go to school. Early pregnancies and all those things, those must be fought. So we're working together with these organizations that have come to help us. We are also looking at the empowerment of our people. Yes, there's traditional land. We're not giving title deeds, but certain certification. We're trying a pilot program, I think, in Chipata. We have about 6 chiefs that are practicing this to see if we can give certification to individuals so that we localize problem, all these things. So all these things are coming up in trying to address the challenges that we have. We have seen also that conservation farming methods are being taught. We have an organization in Eastern Province called Komako. It is spearheading the issue of conservation farming. And it is encouraging people to make sure that there's a value addition. So all these are ways in trying to make sure that the challenges that everyone here is talking about are addressed. The human aspect, the human nature where we fight, you know, we have systems in this country, for example, on the political level, you know, you have own differences, you must fight, yes. On the traditional level, you may fight, those will continue. But we should not lose sight to the main aspect of protecting the environment. I think that's why we're here today, to try to see if we can forge ahead as one body to fight. And as traditional leaders, I think they want to see what we can lend to this effort. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Hello. Many of the Royal Highnesses here have given a catalogue of different roles that chiefs perform in their chiefdoms as pertaining to the environment and the natural resources. I liked the list from His Royal Highness Shima. It was quite comprehensive, and the Ngabela as well. I think, there's very little that I would have liked to add. We need, the Royal Highnesses do a lot of coordination of the various operations and developments that go on in their chiefdoms. And they also carry out controls in the development of these resources. Enforcement is another aspect. We need to enforce, rules and regulations that we make, pertaining to how we use our resources. And then there's also communication to the various sectors of our communities. This is done through the chief and all the various structures that have been, put in place by the royal establishments. One of the things that have been, a very big source of concern, which is a challenge to their Royal Highnesses, is the legislation. Legislation, we've seen it, the way it impacts negatively on the operation of their Royal Highnesses. I'm actually talking about the Lands Act and the Mines and Minerals Act, which puts a chief in a very embarrassing situation, where, for example, if minerals are discovered in an area, all the chief's subjects will be moved, and the chief has no say over that. It puts a chief, in a very, very embarrassing situation. He cannot even, negotiate for his people, any favorable compensation at all. The other thing that comes into the use of our natural resources is greed, especially when we start to talk about economic development. The more powerful, economically powerful forces come into play, they will make demands, which puts the chief in a very awkward situation, especially if these are, they come and they are backed by, the government. So we need to take an opportunity. Personally, I looked at the roles. These have been covered very adequately by members of the panels here. And also, my biggest challenge was this about the legislation. But there is hope that we have an opportunity. This gathering is one of the opportunities that we should consider, and we should encourage Center for Environment Justice to continue with this. I was happy when I listened to to Reverend Chikoya this morning when he said CEJ is a youth-led organization, but look at what they have achieved over the past 10 years. I also want to congratulate CEJ for the achievements that they have made over the past 10 years. And I would like to request their Royal Highnesses also to put a voice behind what the churches have done to back CEJ. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm Chief Choma from Choma District, Southern Province. Me, I will talk much on controlling of rampant tree cutting and the charcoal makers. You see, my chiefdom is big. It has got the whole entire Choma. So as a result, people are cutting trees rampantly. Then through this, I drafted a letter. This letter, I drafted it 22 April 2019. I, Chief Choma of Tonga speaking people, Choma District, Southern Province, Zambia as above. I thought of and seeing that trees are cut, it's too much in my chiefdom because people are making charcoal and transporting it out of my chiefdom district to Lusaka and the other towns. I therefore appeal to high offices to allow me to work with District Commissioner, Forest Department, Zambia Police, Choma Municipal Council, Judicial Department, Headman, Choma Chiefdom, Charcoal Association groups, and the neighborhoods watch to see to it that trees are cut in a good condition, but not transporting it in other districts or times. Then this letter, CC District Commissioner, CC Forest Department, CC Police, and other things. I did it deliberately because I was fed up to control this charcoal tree cutting. I was trying my level best, but these people who are buying charcoal, they were taking permits from another district, you see? So I didn't want it. Then, doing this, a chief, as I am a chief, I make order, peace and order. That's why I wanted to talk straight to the minister to empower every chief who are here in this system to be given, each of us, one land cruiser to monitor for ourselves, not using forest people, because forest people have seen that they have only portions. The entire chiefdoms, most of it is customary land. So I'm seeing that they don't put mind. And the Royal Highness, I'm very lucky that I have a strategic plan where this chiefdom is controlled, even this conservation of natural resources and environment management is here for this paper. It's very detailed. So, than talking, it's better we involve most of these people like police and other things. Because this democracy we have in Zambia, at times when you are doing fine, they put it like political, which is not there. A chief is entitled to make peace and order in order to monitor the resources in his chiefdom. So I appeal to the government that how can I control my chiefdom while the resources are going out from my chiefdom to other chiefdom, while everybody has got a chiefdom? May I ask one of the government, you people know we are taught, can you answer me, how can I control with you, you know, the district commissioner is here, police is here, how can we work? Because a chief he has to work hand in hand with the government to help the government. You see, we are helping the government. So if we are left out, there is no way we can control it. As we know that climate change is there already. Gentlemen, how can we work together? Please. Through Chair, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief Choma, for that submission. May I request that a response be given to that question, perhaps by the district commissioner who is here and other government ministries that are responsible for some of the issues that are raised. Forestry, do we have representatives from forestry here?
Good afternoon once more. My full name is Shamleya, the District Commissioner for Sinazongwe. Come again, Mama. I'm the District Commissioner for Sinazongwe. First and foremost, allow me to respect all the Royal Highnesses that are here. And may I simply say all protocols observed. The first thing that I would want to assure you is that government will always love you and respect you. Believe you me, even in our offices as we take all our responsibilities as District Commissioner, we are always told to respect and consult chiefs. So I feel the issue of saying government doesn't love you or it doesn't give you powers, I think it has been misinterpreted. May I just say, if there are issues, let's bring them, because we are trying to dialogue here. So if you have issues, we are here to listen. I'm sure government has an ear to listen through all these challenges that you are facing. Otherwise, may I go to the question? I feel when there are such challenges in a community, I think the chief district commissioners, police, forest officers, they have to sit down in a stakeholders meeting to actually see to it that all these challenges that the chiefs are facing, like the cutting of trees in the chiefdom, should come to an end. I see no reason why someone can get a payment from another district and then you go to the other district to cut down the trees. I feel it's not fair. Let's respect other people's territories, in short. Let's not, you protect yours and then you go and destroy other people's wealth in other chiefdoms. Maybe my colleague can say something. District Commissioner Choma.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. Good afternoon, Your Highness. Okay, good afternoon, Your Royal Highnesses, and good afternoon, everybody and participants in this workshop. Today we've come for environmental dialogue, protection dialogue, and to me, when I look at this word protection dialogue, or to say environmental, it's a big word. It's quite a very wide word, in a sense that we are here to ensure that we submit where we are lacking. And the Center for Justice and Environmental Protection, the CEJ, they have made it possible that this is the first kind of its meeting to call all of us, especially us from different areas, and we can say the whole country, we are here. Now the question that was raised by His Royal Highness, my Chief Choma, is a question of concern to my office, and definitely as the Royal Highness have done now submission under environmental protection dialogue, we are going back also. We have got many channels in the government, structures in the government that are structures in terms of reporting and also how we dialogue with their Royal Highnesses, beginning with also their headmen and senior headmen in the process of that nature. So I would like to say that the concern of the Royal Highness, especially Choma has got a very big challenge, especially in issues to do with climate change. And the dialogue that the Royal Highness has brought in is a very serious, which nobody would say no. It's a very serious matter that I will definitely take into consideration. Even as we go back, we'll be able to call what we call the HOD's stakeholders meeting to ensure that these are able to tackle. But for this submission, all the Royal Highnesses and us will do our own submissions, because they're also for better for this country. After this, there will be a very better channel of even submitting this to cabinet, because we are here to represent His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Zambia, who is an appointing authority to all of us. And we, for the Royal Highnesses, are the eyes of the President wherever they are, and we are also commissioned by His Excellency, the President of Zambia, and that's why we are here. So we take these matters very seriously, that we are so happy to be part and parcel of this. I think we cannot say much on this. We still have this workshop and we're still here to learn more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yes, please. You may give your submission.
Thank you, Moderator. I don't know if we are being fair on the district commissioners, because these are policy matters, and I would have thought that maybe the ministry itself is responsible for the environment, which would also be responsible if a law has to be revisited. They would do that. I thought we were above the districts, and that as a dialogue, we are dialoguing with the government as well, so that in considering policies which in the end turn into law, that this will be considered, will be taken on board. Because otherwise now we are, I don't know what level we are in the discussion or in this dialogue, or when you make presentations of what the Royal Highnesses have agreed, whether it's going to go to every district in the country or they are going to go to a ministry which is responsible for the environment. I'm getting worried at the direction, and I think you need to direct us properly so that we know that at the end of this, where are the deliberations or what we've agreed upon as a dialogue, where are they going to go to? Because otherwise we'll just be talking to ourselves. There was earlier, I think, an observation made by Chief Macha when he said, where are the people? If we are dialoguing, are we dialoguing just amongst yourselves or with other people? So we know the sentiments, we know that the district commissioners work with the Royal Highnesses, but I thought now we are at a stage where the Minister of Lands came to open this. That's how serious this issue is to the Royal Highnesses, that it's above their local, their local governance, but they are going beyond because of their problems that they're encountering. So I think we need to be guided so that we don't seem to be talking for the sake of talking. Maybe you might even want to maybe bring in in addition to what we have, the government people that are here, but those who are those who are going to take the matter immediately, not on the district level, but at the national level.
Thank you very much. I think those are very valid submissions. And looking at the tone of the dialogue itself, we do have the solid understanding that this dialogue is with the government represented by the line ministries responsible for environmental protection and all other line ministries that play a key role in ensuring that environmental degradation is kept at bay. Allow me to request CEJ to respond to some of the observations that I think are really critical in terms of clarifying the clarity, I guess, on the level of dialogue. We did have the minister this morning opening this particular dialogue. I think maybe we could give a confirmation to the Royal Highnesses in terms of what the submissions from this session will culminate into, and whether or not there will be a formal submission of these recommendations and at what level those submissions will be directed at. I think also they would like clarity on whether we will have a higher level of government representation to listen to some of these submissions, particularly because there are submissions for policy enhancements. I think there were a number of policy challenges raised. The Lands Act was referred to, the Mines Act was referred to, specific challenges around law enforcement and the role that traditional leaders can play. CEJ, please do provide guidance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will hand over to our board chair, Mr. Vincent Ziba, and he will be able to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator and the Director, CEJ. And thank you very much, Your Royal Highnesses, for a rich discussion that you have provided to this meeting. I must say it was like I'm in class learning natural resource management and governance. It was very enriching and enlightening, I must say. I must also mention to you that this meeting was initially supposed to be officially opened by the President, who had given an indication of okay, but of course due to other national duties, the Minister was delegated. We have in our plan at the end of this to have a report generated which would be submitted to State House, and you would also want to take even the video of the discussions. So this discussion that we are having will translate into a report with actions that will be the resolution of this gathering. So please, we can assure you that this discussion will get to the highest office of the land, and of course through the Minister herself, with the captions and the live discussions that we're having. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairperson CEJ. Your Royal Highnesses, permission to proceed in the interest of time. I think we have had a very rich discussion around trying to understand the role of traditional leaders in environmental protection. Looking at the set of questions that were given to us, we've been responding to most of the key questions that have been posed to us. I think they have been very solid submissions related to the policy framework and how some of these policies are disenablers or actually enabling environmental protection. Some of the key challenges, I think, also have raised the fact that whilst traditional leaders have authority, you feel that you don't actually have the power to protect these natural resources because of some of the challenges that are associated with the way that these resources are basically governed and how also certain permits are issued. I think there was a very solid submission and example that was also given around displacement of people, particularly when investments have been secured, and that was also a good example of sometimes how traditional leaders may not be able to do very much about a situation. I think in the interest of time, perhaps you will permit me to ask the next question that I feel perhaps we could zero in view of the many challenges that you have raised, because most of the other questions have already been responded to. Your Royal Highnesses, what mechanisms would you want to put in place to strengthen the role of traditional leaders in environmental protection, looking at the challenges that you have already expressed? What do you think perhaps would help to change the status quo and to strengthen your role? What would be your specific call to government around environmental protection? So I've given you a double-barreled question there, and perhaps after those two questions, we can then begin to wrap up your panel discussion. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you. Anyway, in that regard, what we, as traditional leaders, what we can do, it's better the government looks into our traditional courts. These traditional courts, if they could recognize them as primary courts, so that they are legalized, so that we could also be strengthened, whereby if, let's say, like we come across all these perpetrators in regard to protect our environment, at least we also sentence. There should be a minimum sentence whereby if we say we have put bylaws and sensitize our communities, then from there someone breaks one of those bylaws, I think it would be prudent for us to also to take that route. Like the way other chiefs, other speakers had the area alluded to, like Chief Marcher. If our traditional courts comes like primary courts, where they are legalized through the Parliament Acts, then I think we will be able to protect our environment. Thank you.
Please go ahead, Chief Nyakulenga.
Thank you, my moderator. I think one way also of strengthening the role of chiefs would be when it comes to issuance of licenses that are to do with land and resources. Because what's happening now is traditional leaders are being rendered irrelevant in terms of some licenses, if not most licenses, that are issued in Lusaka. When they come with the chiefdom, they are just coming to ask for permission to work in the chiefdom. Otherwise, everything has already been done. They have already been empowered with that paper, and that paper has been signed by our authorities in Lusaka. If the chief turns it down and refuses that person carrying that paper, it is termed like the chief is against development. The chief is opposing maybe the government for the day by not allowing what they have already authorized in Lusaka. Maybe to start with the chiefs going up, not the other way around. This is one way that they would strengthen the role of the chiefs, by starting with the chiefs, consulting with the chiefs before those licenses are issued. For example, the timbers cutting, even those charcoals, the forest, the forest has got authority, to prosecute people doing certain things in the forest. But as the earlier speaker said, if the chief prosecutes such a person, he goes to the forest, he goes to the district, it will be turned down because the forest department is legally supported by law, which the chief doesn't hold. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very valid submission. Thengambela, may I request you to make your submission?
What should be done to improve or to make a change? I think that is a legitimate question, a very good question. Listening to the Royal Highnesses here this afternoon, we have learned quite a lot of gaps, loopholes in the smooth management of natural resources protection. I would suggest that as a way of improving the situation, government must also look at the way legislation is enacted in this country. There are certain acts or rules, or rather laws that are made which conflict with traditional systems. I think that in itself is a minor point in the quest for protecting our environment. I would therefore suggest that any legislation whose effect has a bearing on the traditional system must be very carefully crafted and drafted so that it doesn't remove the positive aspects that the traditional systems have in the protection of natural resources, of our resources. So, when such legislation is contemplated, I think some consultation at certain levels with traditional leaders must be made. That's one. The other way, the other issue that we should probably consider in trying to protect our natural resources is for government to provide traditional leaders with facilities to monitor and also supervise natural resources management. What resources am I talking about? I think resources like transport, or vehicles, motor vehicles, water vessels, where it is necessary to enable traditional leaders to get to certain areas to see for themselves and also to correct situations where natural resources are being degraded. The third point I would like to raise in this regard is benefits sharing. Traditional leaders are the custodians of our natural resources. They are the people who have guarded and protected these resources from time immemorial. But when harvesting these resources is done, then all the benefits go, one, to the investor who is harvesting them, two, to government, to central government, which is issuing licenses and making laws that enforce the investor to pay certain taxes. But the traditional leadership, which is protecting this, which is looking after these resources, loses out and gets nothing. I think that too must be looked at. So these three points I think should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, please, go ahead.
I just want to add a practical suggestion to what Ngambera has said. I like the contribution that was made in relation to when God created man and the woman and put them in charge of the jurisdiction of an area or the garden. There was no third party. Now, in this situation, the third party has come and it takes it or shares with the government. But what it should be, if we are really serious about proper protection of our resources, the issue of ownership must come first. Like someone was saying, that how do you protect something that does not belong to you? We do not have, as yet, the mining industry in Barrosland, but listening to what the Royal Highnesses have said, it would appear that what people in those areas where the mines are getting is nothing. Social corporate responsibility is not enough compensation for an inheritance. Something that you have inherited is yours, it belongs to you. Now, for you to merely be shifted and a house being built for you, for something that should have given life, should have supported life for your children and the children of the children, it does not seem to augur well. What we would like to suggest is that there must be a deliberate policy to ensure that when an investor is given an opportunity to invest in an area, the chief in that area and the people within, the owners of that resource, must become shareholders because they are contributing land, they are contributing the natural resources while the investor contributes the money and while the government contributes the legal system, I mean the policy guidelines. So that is how it should be. Let us as traditional leaders, become shareholders in the investments that is done in our areas. That would be sufficient compensation. That is social corporate responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please, please go ahead.
I know I talked earlier, but I think it is important to emphasize that everyone must recognize that traditional leadership is real and it is viable. That realization should be there. Then all those in the protection of environment, whenever they are planning their activities, let them have traditional leadership in mind. And both, when considering resources, we do not want us to be used whenever there was something that you do. You would drive from town in vehicles, tell us what to do. Us, when we are telling our headmen to do, they are not paid. They do it in kind. Consider that aspect of performance. Because in whatever you do, you must consider efficiency. Officers would move from town efficiently, arrive at the palace or anywhere. But from there onwards, because we do not have the facilities, we don't have bicycles, vehicles that we can use to implement what you people have planned, what government has planned, then you are not likely to get what you really planned to get. So consider that. At the end of the day, also looking at the Department of Forest, they do not have resources, they don't have vehicles, they have no transportation. You have officers there, but when we call upon them to help, we sympathize with them. They do not have vehicles. How do they carry out their work? You can't have officers in offices as if they are furniture. Furniture is even serviced sometimes. You can't have government officers in the offices doing nothing because they do not have transport. One then questions, who is doing the planning? When you talk of budget that the Minister of Finance was delivering in Parliament recently, one would think that those things were considered. These are questions. We must improve in these areas if we would like also to ensure that the chiefs that have come here today should help. Chiefs are very ready, and we are impressed with what has happened here. And whatever we are doing, all these things, we must consider justice. That's why I'm very impressed with this organization that is mentioned as with justice at the end. I think it's incredible, done by young people who were young also. You will become like us, but you're doing a great job. Listen to us, listen to our bickering and all those things, and see what we have done in the past 20 years. Have we impressed you? You have impressed us in the last 10 years. So let's try to bring that kind of zeal even to us, the traditional leadership. We want to change attitudes. Because if we don't change attitudes, it will remain the same. We've been talking about tradition. We're traditional leaders, doing things the way they are as Africans, traditionally. So what is it that we are doing traditionally that is not okay? That's what you have to be addressing. Advising us that no, I think traditionally you are inadequate here, and we want to help you, we will accept. But if you want us to completely forget the traditional way of doing things, sometimes we may resist. We may look as if we don't want any development, but it's because you're forcing us to change suddenly, but not seeing any benefits. When someone wants to change the way you are doing things, there must be a reason why. You should be tempted. So Let's all be tempted to ensure that we can protect our environment. I'm tempted because it's our environment. We must protect it for our future, for the future of our children. That's why I'm here today, to ensure that as a traditional leader, I want everyone to continue living as we used to do in the olden days, seeing all the streams with a lot of water, unlike now. Thank you very much.
I second what Her Royal Highness Chieftainess Nakulenga proposed. These licenses, those investors that are bringing those licenses, mainly do not regard the chiefs. These licenses have got to start with the chiefs first, then last to the Minister of Mines. Just imagine, let's talk about the very much important Mukula tree. The Royal Highnesses have been with those trees for centuries. And there are some people who have been living there, monitoring those trees, but they can't be given the chance of cutting those trees so that they are able to get something out of them. Most of us, we have got forests, local forests, and we have been ensuring that those trees belongs to the locals. At the end of the day, you find the trucks coming to the chiefdom, start cutting those trees, and they leave. In my chiefdom, I'm one of the chiefs who has been affected. There is a lot of manganese. What did we see? We see people coming with the licenses offered already by the Minister of Mines, without even the chief knowing. We have got some places where we do not want those places to be disturbed. It is not like in Lusaka, where you find a baby buried tomorrow, the baby has been exhumed. In our chiefdoms, burial places are very much respected. And these days, they are no longer respected because the Mines and Mineral Act is not talking about that. You find the Chinese in the burial place. Once you ask him, he says, I've been given this area for an exploration license. You can see the exploration licenses here. I think the government have got to be very much serious about these things. I'm not wasting my time, thank you.
Thank you very much. I always say to friends that we Zambians have one thing that we do very well. And that thing is how we help each other in funerals. Even if the person who has died was a thief who stole from you, but you will still attend the funeral because that's how typically we Zambians are in our traditions. And my cry to strengthen how the traditional chiefs would protect the resources very well, I think is the cry that goes to the government like anybody else is saying. Our government must consider every traditional ruler as part of them. My first plea is that the government first deliberate policy, despite whatever any chiefdom has done, may they consider every chiefdom as part of them. And once that is considered in this country, like we do in funerals without any segregation, I think the leaders on traditional level will be strengthened and they will look at the whole thing as being part of the whole system. I will give you a little example of our neighbors here who are not very far. Those of you who have been privileged to travel to Botswana here, it's not true that Botswana is only one tribe, Tswana. No, there are many tribes. But the only thing that they have hidden themselves in is because traditionally they've given their love to their traditional leaders more than anything else. And so my plea in this August House is that if there is any resolution to take to the government to strengthen the powers and the zeal of the traditional leaders, is first of that one appreciating the leaders wherever they're coming from as part and parcel of the government of the day. And as we do that, the leaders will have no difficulties to participate in protecting the environment. I'll give you an example. This morning, I was questioning this institutional framework. If you look at this, this is a very good thing to deal with climate change. I'm not refuting, this is very wonderful. But look at the composition. Council of Ministers, Vice President, Chairperson, meets 2 times per year. Steering Committee, Permanent Secretaries. They meet the times are forgotten. Combined stakeholders, about 3 different representatives, Chairperson, Minister of Lands, Department of Climate Change, Government. Where are the chiefs? So that is why we are saying that we should go back to our roots. Let's go back to our roots and embrace the custodians of traditional land where the resources are. And as we are planning, let us plan together with them. If they have no resources, let us help them with those resources. If they need help, let us give them that help, despite where they are coming from or whatever cry is coming from the land. Thank you.
Yeah, let me agree with what my colleague from Sinazongwe has just stated here. Because right now, if you came to Sinazongwe district, much of our land has already been licensed, the licenses have already been given to people who are also probably representing their friends who come from afar. And by so doing, we find that we create a lot of problems in our areas. Now, what would I want the government to do? They should completely stop authorizing people, give them licenses here before they sit together with us in the villages. And when we say they come to sit together with us in the villages, they would not come and sit with me alone as a chief. We have a team. We have a team of think tanks, those that we share ideas with, that should we give them a consent. And then people who know how the land is situated, they'll tell you that there are malendes that side. Because sometimes these investors have been bashing into our malendes, and you cannot approach them. The other thing that I would want the government to do is to release capacities, like the other speaker was saying here, to the government offices, those that we work together with. I will tell you, I hope I'm not alarming the situation. Today, my DC is there. Today, if you came to the Department of Fisheries in Sinazongwe, the environment of Lake Kariba, I think, has been disturbed heavily. The fish, as I am speaking now, I might not be wrong, I'll tell you that there's no more fish in Lake Kariba. It's finished. It is just finished abruptly when it became cold, and we are saying maybe because of the cold season. And everyone is still expecting that when the season becomes hotter, like it almost happened in October, we thought we would get a lot of fish. It is still persisted. There's nothing up to now, because the environment is not as it were when our ancestors lived in that time. Really speaking, it is important that the government releases capacities to the government officers there, because in most cases they are doing nothing because they are incapacitated. I think this is what I wanted to contribute.
Okay, please make your submission. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Just to answer your question on environmental protection, ever since morning I've been talking about power, not just authority by the chiefs. Now you understand what power is talking about. If anything from the customary land, traditional land by the chief, please let the chief give consent first. That's all. That's to answer the question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for those very, very valid submissions. I do hope that our rapporteurs paid attention to the recommendations that have come from the Royal Highnesses. Many of those submissions are extremely valid and would perhaps provide a game-changing environment in terms of how we manage our natural resources, how we use them more sustainably, and how we basically protect. There were a number of very pertinent issues that were raised in the issues paper that was presented earlier this morning by CEJ and of course the communities that provided input into the study. And one of the key issues I think that was raised was the issue of water rights. We will not go into the discussion on water now in the interest of time, but I am guided that this conversation and some of the points that perhaps have been left out, we may have an opportunity to wrap up the session more conclusively in day 2. In concluding this session, allow me to just pick a few points here and there from what has been submitted. I think number 1, there has been a very solid submission from your Royal Highnesses around the issue of mining license issuance. It is very clear that you are submitting that this process is basically a top-down approach. And by the time people are coming down to the communities, there is very little that can be done to sort of guide where exactly these mining licenses should be given. So your submission is that perhaps government should consult you first through a well-defined mechanism before the actual licenses can be given. I think there have also been submissions that are looking at strengthening the role of traditional leaders in law enforcement, in the management of natural resources. And here you made a submission around legalizing your local courts, giving you authority to be able to implement some punitive measures where laws are being broken, where there is illegal cutting down of trees, discriminate cutting down of trees, and even other resources that were alluded to. I think you also made a solid submission around the ownership of these resources, and you did make a submission around the consideration on benefits. I think there was an actual submission around whether there is a possibility to also consider some kind of shareholding, because you are providing these natural resources and it almost feels like the third party is benefiting more than they should. You talked about the need for government to look at the way legislation is enacted, and if this legislation has a bearing on traditional systems, there must be adequate consultation. There must be a proper assessment of the implication of certain policy measures much more strongly than it is now. I think you also made a call for stronger monitoring and alignment to the traditional systems on the ground. So there were very valid submissions there around issues related to policy. I think there was a submission that the traditional leadership should not be used as a rubber stamp. The actual submission was that there's need to recognize that traditional leadership is real and it is viable, and you do not want to be used merely to rubber stamp situations or positions or licenses that are already given. You would like to be engaged a little bit more than you are currently, and recognized for the actual power that you have in view of the fact that you are custodians of these natural resources. You also did submit that the resources that are sometimes given to government agencies such as the Department of Forestry are inadequate for them to fully execute their mandate, and therefore there should be consideration for resources to be given at your level to provide additional support for monitoring the use of these national resources. You alluded to some of these facilities that could be used to monitor, to be transport-related vehicles and even water vessels in certain parts of this country where that is the most reliable form of transport. There was also a submission around benefits sharing, that this needs to be looked at. We are alive to the fact that there are a number of proposed revenue sharing mechanisms, but it's very clear from your submissions that the benefit sharing system currently may not be working as much. Lastly, you did point to the fact that you would like to see a strengthened process or mechanism of obtaining prior consent for the way that natural resources are being used, and this mechanism really may need to be tabled with government to make sure that there is a way of ensuring that adequate consultations are also backed by actual informed consent by the communities themselves and of course your establishment. Allow me at this point to bring this session to an end by thanking you most sincerely for your very valuable insights. August House will agree with me that we have learned quite a lot around the role that you play in managing and protecting our environment. As we end, we'd just like to again underscore the fact that environmental degradation is a real challenge for Zambia, and hearing your Royal Highnesses commit to protecting our environmental resources, I think is a plus for this dialogue, and it is something that most of us as delegates will take very seriously. It is also our hope that the key actions that you have presented in this panel will be well packaged for the attention of the Republican President, His Excellency Edgar Chagwa Lungu, and that there will be feedback given to you in terms of how some of these issues can be resolved. Thank you very much. Allow me to request the dialogue moderator to come to the podium. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Isabel Mukelebai from WWF, for handling probably the most important section of the dialogue. And thank you, Your Royal Highnesses, for your very, very candid and well thought out submissions. As the chairman of CEJ has said, your inputs will be articulated and brought to the attention of the highest office in the land, as His Excellency was originally scheduled to attend this meeting or to open this meeting and to listen to some of the concerns. So thank you very, very much for all the input, including the responses that were given by the senior government officers here present. If you look at the program, there were supposed to be 3 more sessions this afternoon, 3 more topics, but this last session, the panel of the traditional authorities, is so important that it was allowed to run the course of its time, and it has in a way combined some of the sessions that were supposed to be held after this one. Secretariat will revise the program and see what needs to be picked up tomorrow. Your Royal Highnesses, before I call upon the Director for Action Aid to give us the closing remarks, just a few highlights for the day. The first one is that the dialogue effort involving WWF, Action Aid, and Bread for the World, of course, with approval from government. One word from the EU delegation leader is that we can develop economies and reduce greenhouse gases which are affecting our climate and yet improve in GDP. There is an option of taking on new technology to improve our economy without continuing to damage the environment. He also hinted on the European Green Deal, which we will come to. He further acknowledged, and several speakers acknowledged, His Excellency's address to the Biodiversity Summit in September, in which the President acknowledged the challenges we are facing, starting with COVID, including some of the challenges that Your Royal Highnesses have highlighted in terms of how it compromises capacity for environmental protection, and yet at the same time the President emphasized government's commitment to ensuring environmental degradation is halted, but also in terms of renewing our relationship with nature so that we don't continue damaging it. Your Royal Highnesses, invited guests, there was a very strong point made in favor of listening to the voice of the Church and how these resources that we have are a gift from God, which we have responsibility to look after. CEJ then framed the discussion in the 7 main issues that will be used in the dialogue. I won't go through those issues, but it includes indeed some of the issues that Your Royal Highnesses have raised. And then the Director CEJ gave us a brief history of CEJ as it has reached its 10th year and is at a stage where it's honoring, first of all, renewing its commitment, particularly to the aspect of justice, but also honoring those that have helped it in the journey. Climate Change Moderator gave us the framework and institutional arrangements for fighting climate change, which, as you know, Your Royal Highnesses, invited guests, is a defining problem of our time. It's not just an environmental problem, it's a development problem, and it is what they're calling an existential problem. It is challenging the very way in which we exist. Briefly, Your Royal Highnesses, it is clear you have submitted that you have a very, very clear role to play that ranges from coordination and control of activities in your area, but it goes beyond. It includes access, it includes dissemination of government policies. But there are challenges in this work. and they include limited capacity to do the role that would help protect the environment. There are conflicts in the legislation, particularly those that remove power from traditional authorities, and in some cases they make the traditional authorities be relevant in the process. The issue of licensing was particularly highlighted, and His Honor the Ngambela made the point that there are limited alternatives for people from destructive tendencies. Lots of opportunities are in place, including dialogues like this one, government interest, and of course the offices of the traditional authorities. I will not go into what is recommended for strengthening the role of chiefs, but I am tempted to highlight just a handful, and especially the removal of any conflict that might be there, and efforts to strengthen the positive impact of the traditional authorities. Very quickly, the need for resources to increase capacity, the issue of ownership, and that communities and traditional authorities must not just be spectators, they have to be stakeholders based on the traditional ownership of resources. And finally, the point was made that indeed one of the running themes behind this dialogue, that of justice, that an approach of justice must be adopted. A very, very rich day in the dialogue. This will be recorded for reference and for taking up to the higher authorities, because a point was raised about why there is this dialogue and where all these important issues are going to, and we were assured that this will be processed and brought to the attention of the authorities. If the dialogue stops at the dialogue, then it has not achieved its objectives. It must take matters beyond just the dialogue. We need, and the traditional authorities mentioned this very, very strongly, that we need to move from just words and deliberations to actually making the necessary changes that are required. I like the words used by the Gambela that some policies must be crafted and redrafted. It is my honor now, as part of the closing, to call upon the Director for Action Aid, Madam Naluchanganga Ziva, my friend's wife, providing leadership in Action Aid, which is really putting the issues that have been raised on the table in the most forceful way so that they are listened to, and by providing support for platforms like this, so that the dialogue is not just happening in corners, but it is brought to an official platform. The role of Action Aid is acknowledged. Of course, she will be speaking on behalf of the convening partners, including WWF and Bread of the World. Madam Naruchi.
Thank you very much, Moderator. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, all protocols observed. It is an honor to stand before you to provide closing remarks on behalf of the partners of this dialogue. I would like to thank the organizers, CCJ, for putting together this dialogue. Come at an opportune time when we are witnessing the multiple crises such as climate change, COVID-19, as well as economic recession, which has severely impacted on the environment, health, safety, and survival of hundreds of millions of people, communities being pushed deeper into poverty, and therefore creating a very precarious existence. This discussion today have been enriched by testimonies and witness experts on key subject areas. A number of recommendations and issues have been raised, and it's our sincere hope as part of the partners of this dialogue that the recommendation will be taken on board by the government, but also to thank the government for taking time to be part of this dialogue and for listening in. And it's our sincere hope that we will see concrete actions being developed and being acted upon with regards to the various recommendations that have been brought through the various dialogue forums which were taking place from morning through to the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam. Madam E.D.
Thank you so much for the closing remarks. I just want to remind our delegates that we will be having a new campaign for nature briefing, as earlier stated, organized by WWF Zambia. So this will be starting, I think, actually we are ready for it in the next 10 to 15 minutes. So those that are available, and please, you're invited. We're inviting all of you, but if you have commitments after this, you can still go, but we'll be very glad to have all of you be part of it. This is just running within 1 to 2 hours, and it's within Mlokoshi Conference Center. That is in, just hold on, let me call Henry. Henry, are you here? Madam Isabel? Okay, so I have been told that the event is just in the next room, just from here. It is only a briefing on the New Deal campaign, and it will be not more than 2 hours. The closing remarks have already been made, but we are grateful that you are with us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam. By the way, the highlight for the Minister's speech was to accept being champion for the Deal for Nature Zambia that will be that the Director has just referred to. And finally, I wanted to recognize the presence of Ms. Nachla Lankombo, WWF Country Director, who has joined us. Thank you very much, Madam, for coming. Good to see you. I am standing down for the day and strengthening the invitation to the activity to launch or provide information on the New Deal for Nature in the next room. Mr. Malumo, are you making a...
Thank you, Moderator. Good evening, friends. I think it's been a great day for us. A great day in the sense that I think at the start of our day today, we had that warm speech from the Minister, the opening remark. And it is against that I invite all of you to the New Deal for Nature and People campaign information session. This is basically going to help us understand what this campaign is about. It's a campaign that focuses on the restoration of nature and the restoration of Zambia. So I invite you. The event is in room 3, just outside this door here, and you are all welcome. So it's going to run for about an hour and 30 minutes. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, I am informed that the logistics for your coming here and your stay will be sorted out within here tomorrow. Apologies for that. Logistics will be sorted out here tomorrow. Thank you very much, and you're all invited to the session next door. The meeting is now closed. Thank you all very much for your attention.